Just want to make sure we can't travel in time to January.
What why don't we get your Swinpressions of Super Mario 3D All Stars? So I like, and just the context is, I played it a bit on the day, but it's a bit of a Christmas present for me, so sort of packed it away. So I haven't played it since, and I won't play it again till Christmas. But I thought, let's get your thoughts on it.
So I won't say I've put a ton of time into it. I've probably completed the first three or so worlds of Mario 64, with the exception of the ones that like require the wing cap, which I haven't got yet, and things like that. Put a bunch of time into Mario Sunshine as well. Got to like the fourth area of that, but that game's a lot more open than 64. So it's like 64 is kind of a little bit more linear at the start, whereas Sunshine kind of says after you get the first shine, it pops up another thing straight away. You can go there. And Galaxy's the one I put the least time into because I didn't want to rush that because that's the game that haven't played through properly. So I've only done kind of like the first, like the tutorial world and the first, Galaxy after that. But what I wanted to do was just play each one enough to the point where I can at least talk about what the collection does or doesn't do and my take.
Yeah.
So last week we talked about, you had a great segment about why the fact that these games are emulated is actually a good thing. And these are honestly great versions of the games to play. I'll say with very minor tweaks, but when I'm playing Mario 64, it's not like I'm going, this is a bad way to play Mario 64. It's very faithful. They've obviously done some upgrades to the texture work, things like that. But from the overall package standpoint, and none of this is a surprise. We've talked about it, and everyone kind of knows at this point that it's so bare bones that it's almost ridiculous. There's nothing to it. I swear the Switch Online NES and SNES apps have more bells and whistles than what these games do.
Yeah, they do, don't they? Yeah,
And
that's true.
it's interesting because it's the same like people that actually handle that as well. So it's a direct comparison. And I can't help but compare this to the first Mario Stars, which is, it's ingrained in my childhood. We've talked about it a lot when all those Mario announcements happened. And I won't say that those games were filled with bells and whistles. First of all, Super Nintendo, there's like the scope of what a Super Nintendo game is versus a modern day game is very different. But you at least got the graphical update, right? Which, give or take, is a good thing or not is up to you. But even the way that the menu had charm, it had character. It felt like this is Mario. This is a collection of Mario. With the way that they display everything when you boot the game up in 3D All Stars, it feels so clinical and so just. It doesn't feel like Mario. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And sorry to jump in because like I'll only chat about the bit that I played, which is like just the start of each game and the menu system. But I was the same as you, and it didn't. You know how the other week when I was talking about Hyrule Warriors and, couched around the idea that I actually love that game, but it doesn't feel like a Nintendo game and it doesn't feel like Zelda, really. It feels a bit like a knockoff almost. Like, that's a bit insulting. I don't mean it like that, but it feels a little bit counterfeit. And this just didn't feel like Nintendo. It's so brutally minimalistic.
It almost feels like what would have happened if Nintendo went under and someone bought the publishing rights and created a collection.
Yeah, that's such a good way to say it. That is so good. That is 100% right, dude. This is like Activision Blizzard.
Yeah.
Gets the IP and then they just go, we're going to put a collection of 3 games that are basically ROMs with some stuff around it to make it work.
And
that's good.
The 360 PS3 era, that's when we started to see a lot of these classic games come back, a lot of classic game collections. Like PC had game collections for a long time, don't get me wrong, and the NES did as well. But the 360 PS3 era is when we started seeing all the digital clips games, the Konami ports, where they would start throwing in some artwork and start throwing in some special features. But the bare minimum, for Mario 3D, which is 4x3, they haven't upgraded at 16:9. There's not even an option to set some kind of artwork or color on the side of the screen. It's so bare bones. That's easy enough that without touching the game itself. And we talked about the way that they're using technology to almost inject these new assets into the games, which is um, creating like wrappers on the side so that you're just not looking at blank things. Like just I don't care so much about it, but it just feels half-assed, honestly.
And again, like I know that we're talking about the past a little bit, but from a Nintendo point of view and what they're all about, like look at the Super Game Boy.
Exactly.
I don't know if everyone, well, like definitely the audience is a bit younger. So, the Game Boy, the resolution of that was like 160 by like 120 or something like that, or 140. And it was different ratio and different pixels than a SNES. So you're going to have like a box, and if you stretch it out, it's not going to work. So they had these beautiful like borders that you could have, and it was like sometimes custom borders, like with Donkey Kong 94. Like that's the type of thing I'd expect from Nintendo, that kind of passionate, all these little touches that they just put that charm on. And with this, they just sort of said, F it. Like, your whole point, like, I love that point. It feels like someone's taken over the IPs, or, Nintendo's gone under and they're going, well, these 3 games are going to sell. Let's just whack them together and spend 20 grand to get the whole package out there.
Yeah, it's almost soulless,
Yeah, it kind of is. Yeah, I'd totally agree with that.
And even look like it's kind of, this is really stretching it, but looking at the box art, which I got in my hand right now, I swear Mario All Stars just looked so much more magical on the SNES. If you had like the big star, and then Mario had a top hat on and stuff, it just felt much more like, hey, this is a celebration of Mario. This feels like, hey, we need to release these 3 games quick.
Well, so it's not our version. So in Australia, we don't need to put the rating of the game on the actual cart, or like, what do they call these? They don't even call them carts, do they? I can't remember what they call them for the Switch.
I have no idea.
But I think it's either in the States or Europe, they have to put the rating on it, and they haven't even bothered like thinking about the artwork or how it should look. All they've done is they've shifted the Super Mario 3D All-Stars logo to the right, like out of the way of the rating, and it just looks like a high school student who's learned how to use Photoshop and gone, oh, don't know what to do here. I'll just put it to the side. There's no creativity or anything. Yeah, like your point around it being soulless. Unfortunately, dude, like I'd have to say the same, man. Like this thing, I was so amped about this. And when you get to your conclusion, I want to also weigh in, but it's I totally understand why people were disappointed with this package.
Yeah, and I'll dig a little bit deeper into the actual way they've treated the games themselves now. So with Mario 64, I still love that game. There's been a lot of people talking on around the internet like, oh, the game hasn't aged so well, things like that, from the design standpoint, and I don't agree with that. I also can't see it from the perspective of a new player, so that's difficult.
Yeah.
But I'm saying this to the people that played it back in the day. I still think it holds up really well, but the biggest problem for me is the camera control. And I know that camera control in 64, the original, was rough, right? I'm not saying that it's any worse, but if there was one thing that they could have done to this game, outside of making the game look like a remaster or make it 16:9, is do something about, you've now got to stick to use the camera and to essentially limit it to the exact same way it worked on the C buttons. With the C buttons, at least it felt a bit more natural when you were pressing the C button to turn around Mario with, I guess, Lakitu with the camera, and where he wouldn't go any further round. So it's like you hit the wall and then you have to go back the other way. But suddenly when you move that to a stick, it feels so limiting. It feels so weird. Where I was almost wishing for the C buttons back playing it.
I think you're right. And people probably don't understand or who are not aware of it with the 64 controller. It only had one analog stick, which was in the middle. So, that whole concept of having an analog stick to manipulate a camera just wasn't in the industry for consoles at the time. And yeah, you had the buttons to be able to move the camera to the left and right, and I still argue that it felt kind of natural, and it still does if you're using a 64. I've played Mario 64 on the 64 recently, it still feels fine. But I think you're right. When you move it to a stick, your whole brain goes back to the like now what you've been trained
Yeah.
of like how you move the camera, and it does feel quite odd. And I've had mates who've played it who didn't play Mario 64, and it's been kind of sad to me. But they're sort of like, "Oh, this game's just unplayable." I was like, "Wow, okay, like that's full on." Like, and they didn't play it, so I think that's the proof in the pudding is how it's aged. For me, it feels fine, but I guess, they don't have that muscle memory of how it worked.
Yeah, and the other thing for me is we know that they haven't done much to these games at all. But what I would have loved more so than a visual touch up is just imagine how great it would have been if you had leaderboards for the stars. Being able to
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
win with your
Yeah.
friends list, be able to say, okay,
Speed running and stuff like that, yeah.
just basically leaderboards around this stuff. Like, how good would that have been? And I know that that's far in excess of what they would have done to this, but that's just, man, so many missed
Well,
opportunities. And
that's not that hard to do, I don't think. Like, I'm just trying to think through it now on the spot. Like, I don't think that that's that hard to do, to be honest, compared to some of the other stuff that we're talking about.
yeah, but the thing with Mario 64 as well, and this is actually not a problem with the game. The game, I've just played that game so much that it just feels so easy now that I almost wish in
Oh,
the
interesting.
future that there was, maybe when they do a proper remaster of it, which they'll probably do eventually, um, is I'd love to see like a Master Quest style mode with Mario 64 where they mix things up, or it's like a harder mode because honestly,
Mm,
like, just once you know all the shortcuts and the ways to like get stars using triple jumps and things like that, it's so easy for me now that I kind of wish there was more. But that's not a thing of the game. That's personal to the player and your experience with it. And with
yeah. And before you move on from 64, it's like, I'm totally in the same camp as you, and it's ultimately kind of just a bit sad and disappointing that it didn't get a remake, or you know what I mean by that? Like, they've really just opened up the whole game and rethought it. And, like in the vein of some other remakes that you're seeing recently, because I feel like the opportunity to do it now, like you probably need to wait another 10 years or something, or what is it, like 96 when it came out, like maybe in 4 years time or 6 years time or whatever it is, when it's like the 30th anniversary of it or something like that. Because it seemed bizarre now if they released a remake for Mario 64 within the next 3 to 4 years, don't you think?
oh yeah, I don't.
Just given that this has come out.
Yeah, no, it would be well in the future when I said that.
Yeah, but it's kind of sad though, just given Odyssey, I feel like the bones of Odyssey is just so great. I just was praying that they would remake it in Odyssey's engine and do a few things exactly what you're saying, like, have a new world or something like that. Like, it'd just be amazing, I reckon.
Yeah, and with Mario Sunshine, so I booted that up. I am a big fan of Mario Sunshine, but the game definitely has its flaws. I'm not going to lie about that. But they've done a great job with Sunshine. So it's they had a tricky task with the controls about how to handle the I guess transpose the GameCube analog trigger, which still was weird to me that they didn't even add GameCube support. But whatever, like freaking, they've just chosen to avoid that. But it's actually not too bad. So the way it works is that you use I think it's ZR, so the one at the back, the bigger one, to essentially do the run and spray, like which I
Yeah.
call the regular, the equivalent of the GameCube when you're just holding it like slightly down. And then when you click it all the way in the GameCube, they've put that on the R button, which is when Mario stops on the spot, and then you can control, vertically in every direction. And honestly, it didn't take long to actually adjust to that. I think it would have been a difficult task to somehow do that on the same button. So I think the fact that they split it between the two actually makes sense. It is with Mario Sunshine's controls, there is a learning period at the beginning anyway. But once I got used to it and reminded myself exactly how you kind of, swapping between the nozzles and everything, I got used to it again, and it just felt like I was playing it on the GameCube. But
Yeah. I never thought that would be that big of a deal. When everyone's like, you can't get this across because it doesn't have analog triggers. It's like, I don't really think that's going to be a problem.
But the game looks really good. It looks super crisp. I guess the sprite textures, like the HUD and things like that, are really good. But the problem I have visually with the game is, so Mario Sunshine always had this heat wave effect that was going on, and for some reason, it seems so much more prominent in this. Maybe because of the resolution upgrade,
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
so much more like in your face and almost makes your eyes hurt sometimes. So it's really weird because I never had problem with that effect at all playing in the GameCube on a CRT. So
Correct.
yeah, that's a little rough, but I think they have done a great job with Mario Sunshine. I don't know if exactly the limitations of what they could and couldn't do with that whole emulated way to do this game, but not even changing, like the GameCube buttons in the like HUD and stuff is a little lazy, definitely.
Yeah, I was surprised about that.
It's not a deal breaker or anything, but it's like it just feels lazy. Like something something you'd see like a B game do when it's ported from
Yeah.
Xbox to PlayStation and they've left the Xbox button in or something.
Exactly. And it's exactly what you're saying, your overriding point that it's like someone's taken, Nintendo from bankruptcy or something and just released this. Because, when I saw the footage of that and that was the official Nintendo footage, I was like, oh, wow, like you might be able to use a GameCube controller just natively.
Yeah,
Because why would they leave the GameCube sized buttons in there? They just wouldn't do that. That's not a Nintendo thing to do. I've never seen them do something like that until this.
so I'd definitely say Mario Sunshine. I'd say it is the best way to play this game. I just hope that heatwave effect, either you get used to it or it's less prominent in the later worlds. If it stays exactly like that, then maybe it's not the best way. I don't know. But other than that, I think they've done a good job. And with Mario Galaxy, as I said, I only played the very early parts of the game. So I did play it on the Wii, but only for about 3 or 4 hours. So my memory of exactly how the game plays with the Wii remote and the nunchuck is still a little hazy on that. But first of all, it looks great. They've done a good job. I think it went from 720 to 1080 or something, didn't they?
Yeah, but no, much more than that. It was like 480 on the Wii.
Oh, okay.
But this game looks so good to the point where I'm like, this just looks like a really good Switch game.
Yeah, it is from an era when I can't remember the term when you had like the lighting around the character. I forget the name of it. It's like Mario's
Like Bloom?
bloom effect around Mario. I'm not a
Yeah.
fan of that because that was definitely a way to kind of make things a bit nicer also on the
Mm.
on the Wii. But I mean, in the terms of it being in a galaxy, it does make him look a bit more ethereal and stuff. I'm not a super fan
Yeah.
of that, but the game runs nice and everything. And I was kind of shocked. So I was playing with the Pro controller. They've done a pretty good job at getting the pointer control
Yeah.
in. Like, I was actually really surprised.
Yeah, but it feels like they've spent the most amount of work on this game. Like, as I said last week, they've actually done a lot to get this game working, like recompiled the game and done a whole host of things to get it to run quite smoothly. I definitely think that out of the ones that I've played and all the footage I've seen, this one's the most impressive. And it feels like very, very, very much the definitive way to play this game.
Yeah, I'm not sure how. I'm not using Joy Cons, but I know that the pointer does get used in some like fairly tense platforming sections later in the game. So I'm hoping that isn't too awkward with the Pro controller. But just using it to collect star bits and things like that is fine.
Mm.
Um, there is a part of me, and I know that I haven't played through the whole game, but I've seen a lot of what happens in the game. This stupid part of me that wishes is like an alternate version of this game that has no zero motion controls, but it's pretty integral to it. I know. It's just like that part of me.
Yeah,
Like,
it's like Skyward Sword.
yeah, Scott.
Because we're gonna have we're gonna have this conversation next year with the Zelda 35th anniversary, and it feels almost inevitable they're gonna release Skyward Sword
Skyward
on
Sword
the
was
Switch.
even more so because it used Wii Motion Plus. Like that was.
Yeah, correct.
But yeah, that's. I guess overall, look, I'm happy to have another way to play these games. I
Mm.
just do wish it wasn't such a bare bones effort from Nintendo. Like just something more to it. I don't know. I think it just feels a bit hollow. And honestly, it's like what, $79 or something over here, wasn't it? It's like
Yeah.
$80.
Yeah, I got it for like 69.
I don't know from a value proposition for the consumer if it's actually worth that amount. I'd say,
Oh, really?
I'd say
Damn.
probably to me as a consumer, I'd be much more comfortable paying something like $50 for this. But obviously, Nintendo can sell it for 80, so from that side
Yeah.
of things, it makes sense. But as me,
Yeah, and
I
look,
feel a bit of a maybe it should have been a bit cheaper for me.
yeah, it's one of those really weird ones where it's like, is it a fair proposition? Now, I'll definitely say it's not a fair proposition, just on the simple logic that, because all these games, it's kind of funny how people are talking about this. Like, all of these games, barring Sunshine, were on Wii U. And Mario 64 has been re-released on a lot of different things. Like, it's on the Wii and Wii U. So it's been on pretty much everything that they've had since the 64, apart from the GameCube. But if you look at how much they sold them for and everything like that, it's definitely like a rip-off in that sense. The thing that I don't understand though, and I want to get your thoughts on it and how you see it. Like, for me, if I had to rate this game, so we're not like a reviews podcast really, or like sort of outfit, but I think, like, to me, it's kind of almost wrong to review this anything less than, on a 10-point scale. For me, I feel like the lowest you could ever put this package as 9 out of 10. Because, for Super Mario 64, I could easily mount an argument to say this is the most important video game of all time. I could easily mount that argument. With Galaxy, and I haven't played a lot of it, I played a bit of it. I understand that as, like, a lot of people's favorite game of all time. So those two games just by themselves, like, for a lot of people are like some of the most important games you'd ever have, right? And then to have them all in a package, I just personally don't see how you could arrive at a conclusion where you go, I'm going to rate this 5 out of 10 or 6 out of 10 because it's so bare bones and, it's so stripped back, which it all is. Like, I'm not saying it's not, but I feel like I just cannot fathom how you can't say, but overall, yes, this is like a 9 out of 10 because these games still hold up and they're still so playable and still so good. Like, if you had to put it on that 10-point scale, where would you land?
Oh, that's tough because, yeah.
But let's just say that we were given a code for this game. We have to review it. What would you give it?
I don't know. I'd probably hover around an 8 out of 10 at the moment. And
really? So you dock at 2 points. I mean, let's be real. You're docking at 2 points from the package, right?
Well, first of all, I would never give any of those games 10 out of 10 by themselves anyway. So
what? Really?
Not 10 out of 10.
Damn.
Maybe 9 out of 10 maybe, but yeah.
Really? You wouldn't give 64 or Galaxy a 10 out of 10? No. Wow. Okay, interesting.
So
interesting.
But I mean, they're I love the games, but they're not in my top 10 games of all times. Well, I haven't played enough Galaxy to judge that. Who knows? But
yeah.
But the reason being is that I do have to. I would rate this on the merits of also what does this collection bring to the table. They're good versions of the games, but it's impossible for me to review it out in a bubble. I need to reference Mario All-Stars. I need to reference how they've been, previously sold, as you mentioned, on different platforms. And at that point, it does factor in. So I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10, and I think that's been generous.
Wow. So what would you give it then, if you were really...
8 out of 10, I said.
No, but you said it was generous.
I said, I think I'm being generous. I reckon if someone gave it a 7 or a 6, I think that's justified.
Oh, jeez, that's so brutal, man. Okay, well, we definitely disagree on it.
But I also rate closer to a 5 scale probably than you. So.
I don't think that's true. I think we're pretty similar in that way. Like, I think you got to remember, I try to avoid games I know I'm not going to like. Like, if I was just forced to review games in general, because I do this, I've got a lot of ratings up on IMDb. Like, I've got a lot of 2s and 3s and 4s and stuff like that. So I don't think that's true, what you said then. Like, I think I'm much closer to 5 on average than definitely games media. Like, they're ridiculous. It's like every game's a 7 or above.
Yeah.
I just think that, like, ultimately you got to judge it by the games as well. Like, I feel like people are reviewing the package more than the games. And
I think it's justified to review the package.
No, no, don't get me wrong. I said from the start, like, I wouldn't give this a 10. I think if this had a really good package around it, like, and I was saying this before it came out, I'm hoping it has a good package around it. I hope it has like some background insights in the development of the game that we haven't seen before, and some really cool stuff around speed running, like you've pointed out, right? If it had that stuff, I'd be saying it's a 10 out of 10, right? But as it is, I don't feel like I can dock it more than a point out of the 10-point scale, just because the package is so weak.
That's fair enough.
Yeah. But we just disagree on it. So
yeah. I'm also looking. We've been talking for nearly 3 hours. I don't want to drag that on.
No, I don't care. I'm going to edit it down to a 60-minute podcast, so it's all good.
Edit out all the times you called Sega Sony.
I've actually put a marker in to check if I actually did do that, and if I didn't, that is going to be the title of the episode. But yeah, do you want to get into our next segment?